So up next, we have Joel Acha from Qubix. I just wanted to thank everybody for, if you have to go, thanks everybody for being part of this. As a matter of fact, I had heard that for Joel, Joel, you there?
Yes, I am.
So welcome. Glad to have you joining us. I heard that you're a passionate Arsenal supporter, correct?
Yes, I was. So this was very useful for me.
Ah, fantastic. Well, Joel, welcome. The stage is yours. You're going to talk about the new Oracle Analytics Semantic Modeler. So go ahead and share with us information on that. We've been looking forward to this.
Okay, thank you. I will share my screen.
And while you're doing that, I may ask you some of the questions on this as we go through this. So I'll let you go ahead and present, though.
Okay. So am I good to go?
Yep, looks good. Go ahead. Thank you, Joel.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Hello, everyone. My name is Joel Acha, and as Dan said, I work for a company called Qubix. I'm a senior business solutions architect. I've been at Qubix for almost a year now. I'm an Oracle Ace Pro, and in my spare time, I'm the track lead of analytics for ODTUG. I have over 20 years of experience with Oracle. I've worked with Oracle, my entire career, and I've also got the analytics certification. And yeah, as I said, I work for a company called Qubix. It's a consultancy that has obviously spread all over the world, and it's an Oracle partner. And we specialize in EPM, ERP, analytics, and we also have managed services solutions as well. So I'm talking about the Semantic Modeler, which is a new tool which has been recently introduced. And just to give you some kind of just some information about Oracle itself. Oracle Analytics, you can look at it as an enterprise solution for analytical insights, gain analytical insights from your data sources. It's a platform at an enterprise level, so it enables collaboration, amongst groups and teams. So that's how Oracle Analytics places itself. The other thing which I need to mention about Oracle Analytics is that it's been designed to cater for a number of purposes. It kind of is spread into three main buckets. There's one called Governed Analytics. Governed Analytics is where what we're talking about today. That's kind of where it fits in the sense that Governed Analytics is you have a model which has metadata within it that defines permissions, and it abstracts certain information from business users and just gives you a platform which is quite user friendly from a business perspective. And that's kind of the main that's the main purpose of the semantic model. It enables you to build that governance, hence governed analytics. Another area is the second one is self-service analytics. That's kind of the analytics for users who are who basically just want to be able to get their insights themselves, and they can just play around with the data and build visualizations. So it's a bit more, there's less governance from that perspective, and it's the ease of use, and there's less dependency on technology teams. So it's beneficial for people who quickly want to get access to information. The third one is related to, I think, Jerome, who's been talking a lot about machine learning. So augmented analytics incorporates machine learning. So I think Dan might have a poll. Just hoping that you can bring that up, Dan. You there, Dan?
Yeah, I was finding my unmute button. Did
Sorry, my apologies. I apologize. Yep, I will get that pulled up. Thank you.
Okay.
One moment.
Can you bring up the poll? Sorry about that.
No problem.
I had to
Okay,
find
so
unmute.
yeah, no problem. That's fine, Dan. Thanks. So
Can you
just a
fire the
quick
poll?
one.
Yeah, there it goes.
Yes, it's up now. So I just wanted to get a rough idea of how many of you guys have actually, used, have hands-on experience with, with OAC, OAS, and OBI. That's good. So it's quite a lot of people. So that's good. So that gives me an idea of how to, how to go about, presenting this. So thanks for that, for answering so quickly. So we shall move on to the next slide. So to start things off, since most of you have experience of OAS and OBI, I won't go into too much detail, but essentially, OBI is a tool that has been around for quite a while. It started off initially from a company called Enquire way back in 1997, and that company quite shortly after that was acquired by Siebel, and Siebel itself was acquired by Oracle. And one thing you would have noticed, because the good thing is that most of you have touched the tool and played around the tool, is that you might notice that there still are some references to the Enquire days. If you look at the error messages, they're kind of prefixed with an NQS error text field, and you've got the NQS server. So these are all things that point back to, the origins of Oracle's admin tool. In terms of high-level architecture of the semantic model, it's kind of split into three main areas. You've got your physical layer, logical layer, and your presentation layer. And it's within these layers that you kind of bring in your metadata of your underlying data sources, model it, and then present it to your end users. So within the physical layer, this is where you define your connections to your underlying data sources. You also, within the physical layer, you define your joins, and this is where you bring in your physical tables. And there are a number of other things that you can do in here, but at a high level, these are the things that you can do within the physical layer. Within the logical layer, well, in the semantic modeler world, it's now called the logical layer. In the model administration tool world, it was called the BMM layer, business model and mapping layer. It's within here that you define your star schema, where you have your centralized fact with your measures and your dimensions that join to your fact table. And within the logical layer, you also define things like logical joins. So if you don't want to use the standard inner joins, you can define outer joins and things like that within there. You can define hierarchies as well, so you can enable users to have that drill down capability within the visualization environment. The presentation layer, this is a very important part, because this is what is presented to the end users. So the whole reason for having the semantic model is that you want to kind of present the data in a form that is user-friendly and is, in terms of, from a business perspective, it makes sense to those end users. So you can group the data logically in things called a subject area, and you can create presentation tables that contain columns within that subject area for your end users. Okay, so moving on to getting all this up and running. The one thing I just need to mention that is this is in preview, it's not fully functional and it hasn't been generally released. So if you want to enable the semantic modeler, you would have to enable it within your console, system settings console.
Joe, I wanted to highlight that. That's one of the things that I ran into when we were working with a customer on this, on the preview, they were like, okay, they didn't know where to get that. And do you know, have you heard when it goes out of preview? I have not heard.
I haven't heard either, but
Okay.
I still know that there's still a couple of things which they're working on, because there's still some things which aren't fully functional. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be the next couple of months. That's
Okay.
my opinion. So yeah, thanks for that, Dan.
Yep, sure thing.
So to get that configured, you have to go into your console, and if you just do a search for the preview section, you just have to switch on the toggle for the previous semantic modeler, and you essentially just, I think you have to give it a couple of minutes, and to be certain, if you log out and log back in 5-10 minutes, it should be up and running. Once you've switched on the semantic modeler, you should, within the home page, when you click on the create button, within the create menu, you should have the semantic model option displayed. That should indicate that the semantic modeler is up and running in your instance. So once it's all up and running, if you want to start creating your first semantic model, you just, as I said, you click on the create button and you give your new semantic model a name. Optionally, you can add in a description just so that you know, because you can have several models within your instance. Once you've given it a name, then you're presented with a number of options, and I'll just walk through what these options are and how you can progress with your modeling. So you have 4 options. The first one here is if you want to create a brand new model and you're starting from scratch. In this instance, you start with an empty model and you select the first option. If you have a pre-existing repository, an RPD file or an archive file, I'll show you in the next slide how you can get to an archive file. It's essentially just a zip format of your repository. If you have an existing RPD or archive file, then you can use the second option. If you already have a pre-existing repository in your current instance, which is uploaded to your instance, then to access it, then you use the load from analytics server option. Another area that we'll talk about a bit later on is the Git integration with the semantic modeler. So if you have a repository that's already uploaded to your Git repository, and you want to make a clone of that, then you will choose the 4th and final option. So as I mentioned, if you want to create a zip archive file, what you do is there's just on the right-hand side here, yes, the left-hand side of this icon, there's these 3 buttons. So if you click on that, you'll get so you just click on the export, give your RPD name, select the archive file option, and click on export, and that will create an archive zip file in a zip format for you. So if you want to import it, then that's in the previous slide, you use this option to get that into your modeler. So just at a high level, some of the benefits of the semantic modeler after, the brief introduction of the tool. One very important one is that it's web-based. The importance of this is, I'll give you an example. I'm currently working on several different projects for different clients, and they've got different versions of Oracle Analytics. Now, when you're working on a version, you need to use the right version of the model administration tool. So in that instance, you will need to have several versions of the model administration tool installed on your local machine if you're doing any development work. One of the problems you can have, which I've seen in the past, is if you do use the wrong version, you can run into all sorts of problems when you're trying to do consistency checks. It can fail for a number of reasons. So using a semantic modeler will just rule that out completely, which is, I think, very good. And you don't have to worry about having several installations all at the same time on your machine. Something that we'll talk about a bit later is the source code control. Now, this is a lot better because the RPD, it's a binary file. And because it's a binary file, it's quite difficult to manage it in terms of source code. With the semantic modeler, it uses something called SMML, which we'll talk about later, which makes it a lot better to manage. Something that I'll talk about a bit later on again is system connections. Now, one of the benefits of the system connections is that in the RPD world, when you have several connections in your repository, your model, what you need to do is, if you're migrating from one environment to the other, say you finish doing a piece of development and you need to promote your repository to be tested, and then from test to production, what you have to do as part of that process is to go into your repository and make some changes to the data sources so that they can point to either your test or production data sources. There is a way that you can do this, from command line, but using system connections, this abstracts that from the model, because the system connections are within Oracle Analytics itself, not within the repository. So you can just make a call or a reference to a connection which sits in Oracle Analytics. So if, for instance, you have a finance data warehouse system connection, and it's called Finance DW in development, UAT, and production, then you don't have to touch the connections in your migration, so which really does improve the migration process. I did mention the Git integration, which is something I think is a game changer in terms of how we can do source code control, because it hasn't been the easiest tool, the model administration tool, in terms of working with multiple developers. I've seen all sorts of permutations of people trying to manage a situation with several developers working at once. It hasn't been straightforward. With the integration of Git, that changes that completely. Just with the standard software development with Git, that's now available within the semantic modeler. The Lineage Viewer is another UI tool which allows you to kind of view, you can have a map view of objects, so you can see how that object flows through from, say, the presentation layer through the logical layer all the way through to the physical layer. So with the model administration tool, it hasn't been possible to do that with a view. You have to do with a few clicks, and it's not a single view. So this allows you to see it all in one view. And for the brave ones amongst us, now with SMML, you can use external editors to completely create your model without, you can just completely code it if you want to do that. So that's an option for the brave ones amongst us. So as I mentioned previously about the system connections, this is just showing you. So within Oracle Analytics, if you open up the connection setting, there's just, if you want to make a connection available to the semantic modeler, you just have to set that checkbox, the system connection checkbox. You just have to set that, and that will make your connection available in the semantic modeler.
Joel, question for you on that. When with the system connections, would those be also DV connections that you set up as an end user, or is that done in a different place?
So within Oracle, well, I think during the demo I'll show it as well.
Okay, I'll see it in the demo. That's fine.
Yeah. So I think it's just, you have your connections in Oracle Analytics, and as long as you define it as the system connection, you can use it for DV, and you can also use it at the same time for your semantic modeler.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So just one thing which I found out when I was just getting all of this ready, when I was looking at Semantic Modeler, is there's an option to auto create joins. So if, for example, I import a fact table that has 4 dimensions, what this would do is if I import that single fact table, it would automatically import these joins as well as the tables. So it will automatically create all of that for you. So I think that's a good time saver. And it's just worth noting that if you've got this setting in your preferences set up, then it does that for you. So it does save you a bit of time. It's just worth noting. And just to give you a rough idea of how the architecture works with the semantic modeler. When you use a semantic modeler, you're creating your model in a set of files which are written in this language, the SMML language, which we'll talk about a bit later on. But when you deploy your semantic model to your instance, what happens, the part of the process is that those sets of SMML files are converted to an RPD, the binary file which we're all used to. And that's what's used to access data sources and to render reports and dashboards and visualizations to the end users. So it's just worth noting that when you deploy your semantic model, it's converted to a repository, and that's what's used in the backend to render the visualizations for the end users. Okay, so I think we've touched on a few of these areas already. So the workflow for creating the model is you start off with your physical layer when you bring in you create your connections, or you can use system connections that we've mentioned earlier, and you can then bring in tables and you can create your joins to those tables, and you can create aliases or whatever else you want to do within your physical layer. Once you've got your underlying physical data sources into your physical layer, the next step is to create your logical model, where you have to create that the star schema with your fact and dimensions, and you can create your hierarchies and other things, and create your logical joins as well. Then the next step is to go on to create your presentation layer, which is what your end users see. And just to give your users some flexibility, you can create variables which you can use to hold values which are available to end users at runtime. And I think, as we've touched on, there's also the version control option where you can integrate with Git and you can save your model into Git. So that's an option as well. It's optional, but I can't see why you wouldn't use Git to do your version control. So SMML is the semantic modeling markup language. It's essentially a JSON-based markup language. And the way it works is that when you create your model, essentially what it's doing is creating a number of JSON files using the semantic modeling markup language. This is just a screenshot just showing you one of the files, and it's very self-explanatory. And this is why it's very possible to, if you are that way inclined, you can actually create these offline in an external editor. And essentially, you can create your whole model without having to use any tool other than a text editor. I think I've mentioned variables, and the number of variables which you can use, and you can define and set these in the model. As I think in the poll, I think there were almost 90% of the people who answered said they have got experience. I won't go into much detail about what these are. I'm hoping that most of you know what these all are. So I think I've mentioned a few times the integration with Git, which is one of the biggest features within the semantic modeler, which I think would make a huge difference to those larger teams that, you know, work with several developers on a single model. This would definitely make a huge change, because those of us who are software developers and have worked with other lines of coding, you will know what the benefit is of things like Git for you know, source code control and being able to branch code and you know, all the other functionality that you get with Git. So that now is available within the semantic modeler. Is something which you know, is very easy to set up. I think the next slide, I'll just show a quick video of how easy it is to set up. I think also touched on, you know, how it makes it enables multi-user development, because I think in the past, Oracle has tried to, I think it was called multi-user development, MUD. I think they have tried several times to create that functionality to enable multi-user development, but it hasn't been the best experience. And offloading that to a tool that specializes in that, I think, has made a huge difference. And with the Git integration, you can easily, you know, highlight and track changes that have been made. You know, in the past, when changes have been made to the model, it's almost impossible to track them if you don't know what those changes have been.
Joel, while you're switching to the other slide, I want to make sure we get to this, because I think it's one of the key questions that somebody asked here. Yeah. And by the way, folks, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A. Would you recommend those with existing mature RPDs to convert over yet? Any risk with doing so?
Well, there are some risks. And personally, I wouldn't. I mean, if you're doing it in a production environment, I would strongly recommend you don't do that. But if you want to, you know, get ahead of the game, and you know, you want to just to check, you know, your readiness, you can have an environment where you can play around with it. Because I mean, Oracle have very clearly stated that it's still in preview mode, which means that it's not the finished product. So. I mean, I've been using it for a couple of months, and I haven't used it in production. I don't intend to, because Oracle have recommended that you don't. So no, I wouldn't use it in production, but I would start looking at it, because it would make your development a lot easier and less complicated.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, just to set it up, what you do, there's a Git icon at the bottom right corner. You just click on that. That brings up the Git panel. You just type in your Git repository URL, and you have to create something that's called a Git profile. So you just give that profile a name, and once you give the name, the next thing you do, you have to enter your Git username and a password. But I'll talk about that password in a bit. So once you click on that, you know, within a minute or two, you know, you've got the initialization. Your Git is initialized. So on the right hand side, you can see the panel that shows your connection to your Git repository, and that was very easy to set up. Now, the one thing I did mention is when you are setting up your Git repository connection, you don't use your Git username. Your Git password, user password. You have to use something called a Git personal access token, and you can access that in Git by navigating to the developer settings within settings, and there's a personal access token section. So you just click on the new GitHub app and follow the straightforward commands, and it gives you a lengthy code. It's the access token, which you need to paste in your password option in when you're setting up Git, and that should get you connected. Yeah, and the other thing which I did mention is the Lineage Viewer. The main purpose of this is that it just gives you a single view of Lineage. In the past, if you wanted to do this, you would have to do multiple clicks, and you'd have to look at information in different windows, but you can't get a single view. With the viewer, you have a single view of your lineage, and you can look at mappings from the presentation layer through the logical all the way through to the physical. To access it, you just, within the panel on the left-hand side, you can right-click on any object you're interested in, click on the show lineage, and then you just get a lineage view, which you can see, you've got the three main objects, which are your physical layer, which is the left-hand box. In the middle, you've got your logical, and the right-hand side is your presentation table. So very easily, you can look at the lineage from one area of your model to the other. There are 6 main tabs when you're up and running and you want to navigate through your model. We'll just have a quick look at these. One is for your connections, which I think we've spoken about. You can create your connections, or you can access system connections from Oracle Analytics itself. You've got the physical layer, logical layer, presentation layer, and the variables and tab. There's also a tab called invalid files, which, because all of this is text-based, it's quite possible that someone could, there could be a typo in your JSON files, the SMML. In that case, those files will be highlighted within this invalid files tab, so you can quite easily see, what could be causing errors, and then you can correct the syntax errors. Okay, so now let me just see if there are any questions.
Yeah, Joel, there was a question that came in. Since the new semantic models are SMML, could this simplify the process to update another instance of OAC, for example, a development and production instance?
Yes. And the reason why I say that is because I think, as I've mentioned, one of the main things is, well, because you're using SMML, which is JSON file based, for a number of reasons, when you look at, if you've got several developers who are working on a model at the same time, it's almost been impossible to do that. Or you'd have to split the work in such a way that people are working on different areas and you have to find a way to merge the changes in. But with the introduction of SMML and Git integration, that's a thing of the past. You can have people working on the model and you can create your branches, and once you finish development, you can merge those changes in. So that completely changes that area of development, and it makes it a lot easier. Now, in terms of migrating from one environment development to test to production, as I mentioned, if things, for example, like using system connections, that can ease that as well. So there are a number of things which improve the experience for the developers.
So it's both the SMML and the Git integration.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Another one came up. Will this fully replace the admin tool at some point in both OAC and OAS?
I've asked Oracle this as well, and the answer is not immediately, because for that to happen, there has to be feature parity, with the admin tool and the semantic modeler. At the moment, those two are not. I mean, there isn't parity. I think after the demo, I think I have a slide where I can kind of showcase one or two things which are different. But the long-term view is that yes, it would replace the admin tool, but it's not going to happen anytime soon.
I know when I was looking at it, one of my key questions was, can we handle variables, all the areas? And I think their intent is, yeah, do everything with this, and
yes,
to eventually retire admin tool. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, just one other question.
Oh yeah, here it is. Older versions of OBIEE could only support one RPD. Are we saying that now we can support multiple semantic models, multiple RPDs?
Yes and no. With the semantic modeler, you can work on several models. I mean, like you can have you can only have a single model deployed at any one time, and that's the same with the semantic modeler. That hasn't changed, that's not going to change. But you can have access to multiple models within your semantic modeler. We can, during the demo, I'll show you.
Show that.
You can have a list, a list of multiple models, but you can only have one model deployed on an instance at any one time. Okay, so I will share my screen. Okay.
Yep, we can see your screen.
Brilliant, perfect. Okay, so within your, let me just make sure that this is refreshed. Perfect, yes. So once you've got your semantic modeler all configured, the first thing I'll do is I'll just show you. So within the console, if you go to system settings, as I mentioned, there is an option under preview, which in our case, that's been selected, which means that the semantic model is enabled within this instance. So you need to enable that, and it says you need to give it a couple of minutes to take effect, and you need to log out and back in again for it to become available. Now, when you go back to the main menu, semantic models, and this is kind of what I meant by you have access to multiple models, but I think the architecture is the same with the RPD and the admin tool, in that you can only have one RPD deployed at any one time. So to open it up, just click on it. And this is just a very simple model just for demonstration purposes. So as I mentioned, these are the three main tabs that you have. So these are your connections. So I think this is a system connection. So this is a connection that has been defined within Oracle Analytics itself. Because it's a system connection, it's accessible and available within the modeler. So you could have multiple connections within Oracle Analytics. If they're not defined as system connections, you won't be able to use them here. So clicking on this, this is the physical layer. As you can see, I have one database. If I click on that, then you can see that I have a schema with several tables. And if you want to have a look, you can see that that table has a number of columns. If it has a join, you can see, but this table does have a join. But if I look at this table has joins to these tables. And if you want to have a look at the data, as you can do in the admin tool, you can do that as well. So the logical layer is what we're very used to. So the way you navigate, I mean, you can either right click and go to menus and things like that, or you can double click to open up an object. And what happens is that you have several tabs open of all the objects that you're working on. So if I want to, for instance, look at the SMML of this particular object, it's just a case of right clicking and show SMML, and you can see the SMML of this particular object. And yeah, so that's all JSON based, as you can see. So the next layer is the presentation layer. Similarly, again, you can look at your presentation tables, and if you want to open a particular object of interest, then you can see some further information about that. Very similar in terms of, well, the look and feel is slightly different, but you know, the same features that you have access to in the admin tool, you have access to those within the semantic model as well. Next one along is the variables tab. Within here, this is where you can define your initialization blocks, and you can define connections for that initialization block, and you can test your query just to make sure that it works, brings back the right value, and you can reference those initialization blocks in variables. Yeah, so there you go. So that's just that. So if I had any, as I mentioned, if I had any invalid files, this is where you would see a list of those invalid files. So, yep, okay. So I think that's in a nutshell, very quickly, just a quick run around the semantic modeler. There's a lot more within it, but I'll just give you a quick look, and let me just see if there's a few more questions. Okay, I think we've got some. Okay, so I will jump back to the slides. 1 second.
I was on mute, sorry. Maybe I missed this. When will the semantic model layer be available for OAS?
That's a good question, and I don't know. It's the honest answer. I can't see it being too long, but I think it would probably be sometime next year, in line with the way that the releases of OS are rolled into a single yearly release. I think the OS release is sometime early next year. So if we're going to get the semantic modeler in OS, it will probably be sometime early next year, but yeah, I don't know for certain, but typically that's how OS releases work.
Yeah, I would presume it's in the next release. Well, any final thoughts, Joel? We need to wrap up here.
Yeah.
Anything? And then any final slides or anything?
Yeah, I've just got 1 or 2 final slides, so it shouldn't be too long. Yeah, so as I did mention, it's still in preview, so there are a number of things which don't work. And I do have a link here to an Oracle document that has a list of some bugs and some things which don't work and don't have any resolution as yet. The main one is that the modeler just works for relational data sources as now, not all of them, but the majority of them. F-base and other OLAP data sources are on the roadmap, but they're not currently supported in the current version of Semantic Modeler. So if there are any other questions, I'll have a look.
Well, I think we handled the questions as we went along, but we'll leave this open for a little bit. Joel, thank you very much for sharing that with us. I think this was well anticipated and some great information to see. So really appreciate you going through the semantic modeler with us.
No problem.